What do you get when you have a production company slowly but surely pushing out worse and worse films, and an attempt at making a new horror icon to make the big bucks off of? Imaginary. 2024's Imaginary is a horror film by Blumhouse, directed by Jeff Wadlow. I don't really know how to pronounce his name, and he isn't exactly well known for horror. After looking him up, I saw that he directed 2008's Never Back Down, that I really liked when I was a kid. Amber Heard in that movie was kind of like an awakening for me as a kid. Just little me, unaware of all the poop she would cause, and all the countless sheets and pillows she would ruin. Anyway, Imaginary is a horror movie about an imaginary friend, who would have guessed? But this imaginary friend presents himself as a little cute bear named Chauncey the bear. Going into this, I didn't have any expectations whatsoever for this movie. I saw the ratings before I even thought about watching it, and before I even knew about the movie, the way I learned about it was from YouTubers just kind of talking about how, hey, this isn't a good film. If I look tired, it's because I am. Anyway, after seeing those videos, I decided I wanted to also watch this movie and see if I could make a video on it because it looked kind of silly. So let's get started. Spoiler warning, I'm going to talk about this whole film, the whole story, so if you want to watch it and you don't want me to spoil this, go watch it. As I was saying, this movie is really bad, so let's talk about why. Imaginary starts off like any other low-effort PG-13 movie. Horror sequence that's alluding to something that doesn't happen, or that we don't learn about until far into the future of the film. This all just ends up being a dream. The whole dream sequence in horror films, especially the opening, God, do I hate it. Much like that Nelly song I remember vaguely from like a decade ago. Just a dream. Back in my day. My references are always very current, if you can't tell. Anyway, after the little dream sequence, we get to meet our main character, Jessica. We see her in bed with this English guy. At first, I thought that she was just kind of sleeping with him because of his accent. Like, you know how people say stuff like that. But no, that's actually her husband. Because soon after this, we realize that they have two daughters, she has two stepdaughters, and they're moving into a new home. Not just any new home, though. It's Jessica's childhood home. I wonder how that's going to play into this film. We then see the usual shots of a family moving into a new house, just unpacking and having little conversations that are pretty much meaningless. Maybe there are a couple little added things that are meant to be foreshadowing, I don't really know. I'd say that this movie doesn't ever stray from just doing things that other films have done. I'd say that this film actually excels at one thing, and that is at how unoriginal it is. I don't completely dislike this movie for the unoriginality. There's a place for silly PG-13 horror films about imaginary little friends that are bears. There's nothing wrong with popcorn flicks, as people would call them, but the problems go a lot deeper than just being unoriginal. It actually starts during this unpacking phase of the film, where we learn that Jessica has a troubled past. Then we learn the oldest daughter is just a bitchy, annoying teen that holds resentment towards her new stepmother. And much like Jessica, the youngest daughter is also quite troubled. Their mother is a bit crazy, or their actual mother is a bit crazy, or at least that's insinuated later on in the movie, and the dad doesn't really play a part in this film. Nevertheless, we came here for some spooky moments, and those begin when Jessica and the youngest girl play some good old-fashioned hide and go seek, in a completely unforeseen turn of events. She ends up hiding down in a creepy, dark, damp basement, where she finds a secret door. What's behind the secret door? Well, none other than Chauncey the bear.
Who left you all alone down here? Do you have a name? Chauncey? I like that.
The poster child, the poster bear of the film. The bear adds actually nothing to this film. It could have just been an invisible imaginary friend. I mean, there's a really silly ass plot twist that happens later that we'll discuss. That is my reasoning for why the bear probably shouldn't even be a thing. This movie is pretty much entirely just family moves into a new home, like a lot of other horror films, but the daughter has a strange imaginary friend. Like every other horror film. I feel like I've seen this movie 100 times. To get back to the point about how unoriginality isn't the only thing wrong with this film, the dialogue is awful. The acting is almost entirely terrible. Jessica's not the worst actress, but the kids are pretty bad. A lot of the lines in this movie are just like, they make me a little bit like, ugh, why did you, ugh. Yeah. I mean, sometimes silly dialogue can make me laugh, but when you pair it with bad acting, when you're making a serious attempt at making a serious movie, it doesn't work. There's nothing hinting at me during this film that this was just kind of we're just messing around making a silly horror movie. It doesn't ever come across as that. Anyhow, the movie continues with the little girl talking to her imaginary friend, and the family just kind of thinks it's cute. Until one day when Jessica and the little girl are left home alone, she ends up seeing her having a little tea party and goes to record her because she thinks it's cute that she's having a tea party with an imaginary friend. But then we see and hear a woman. We learn that the girl's real mom snuck into the house and she's crazy, attacks Jessica. Then the police just randomly show up in the next cut and they're pulling her away, but she's like, I'm warning you, this place is evil, there's something really bad here. But who listens to a crazy person? It's later insinuated that that voice wasn't even the mom's voice, I don't think. We see a scene of what looks like the little girl talking and making up a voice for the bear, but then we learn it's actually the bear talking. So the bear has this little kid's voice that almost sounds like the little girl's.
Sleep well, Chauncey. I don't want you to ever leave me. Never leave Alice. Never, ever.
The next day, we see the dad tell the family that he has to go out of town for a few days. Don't really know what he does. Maybe he's in like a rock band. I'm not sure what they were trying to portray him as. I guess that's a good enough excuse. Like, did they assume that the dorky English dad was going to bring some sort of safety to this family? Was he going to protect them from this evil bear? Oh crap, something bad's going to happen. After he leaves, we're introduced to a strange neighbor that the family has. It's this older woman who we learn used to babysit Jessica when she was a kid. And she pretty much spills the beans to us right then that Jessica used to also have an imaginary friend when she was a kid. Seems like the house has an imaginary friend problem. Instead of ghosts, the house has an imaginary friend problem. Because this thing is not insinuated throughout the film to be any sort of demon or ghost. It's just insinuated that Jessica created this power out of her sheer amazing amount of imagination because Jessica's an artist, and artists obviously have great imagination. And because she's such a good artist and was when she was a kid, her imagination was very powerful. Oh man, just awe-inspiring imagination. But not only does the dad end up leaving the family, the stepmom confronts the older daughter and she's like, hey, can you watch the younger girl? I can't remember her name. I'm gonna go and do something. Well, she ends up going and visiting her dad, who's in a retirement home, which is just, this looks bad because the dad, we see flashbacks of him throughout the film, and he just looks like a black guy in his like 30s, maybe late 30s, early 40s. But when she goes to the retirement home, they just make him have like a little bit of gray in his hair, but he still just looks like a young man. I know they say black don't crack, but you're not going to be like a 60-year-old or a 70-year-old having a daughter and look like you're still 30. This guy looks 30. I know what 30 looks like because I'm right around the corner. After Jessica leaves to go to the retirement home, though, we get the common moment where the older sister's like, hey, I'm going to invite a boy over. He's a neighbor of theirs. And if you tell on me, I'll kill you.
Your babysitter's here.
Come on in.
Right.
We're not supposed to have strangers over.
I feel like I've seen this before so many times, but I specifically thought of another movie. It's a moment in a Mike Flanagan film that is very similar to this film, I feel like. It's the sequel to that really bad Ouija movie. For some reason, Mike Flanagan, I guess it's more of a prequel, he made a movie after a movie that had like a 3 out of 10, and it's actually not a bad horror film. It's like a Ouija Origin of Evil, I think's the name of it. Turns out I was a little wrong, though, but I'll show you the scene.
Christ, you scared the crap out of me.
Want to hear something cool?
Sure.
Do you know what it feels like to be strangled to death? First, you feel the pressure in your throat. Your eyes water, and you start to taste something very sour in your mouth. Then, it's like someone lights a match right in the middle of your chest. And that fire grows. It fills your lungs. You see stars, then darkness. And the last thing you feel is cold.
Now, I went and literally paused the film and went to go look at that film to see if I was right. Turns out that the boy in that movie was leaving, whereas this kid was coming in. But I just felt the moments were really similar, and I thought it was a great thing to show you how bad one movie is, and a movie I don't even really like that much, Ouija Origin of Evil, how much better that scene is, also how much better the acting is from the child. I get really enveloped in a movie whenever I watch it for the first time, but whenever I saw that moment, I was like, oh, I gotta watch this movie. And I just kind of wanted to watch Ouija Origin of Evil again because of how bad this movie is. By the way, how creepy is that little girl in Ouija Origin of Evil? Sure, is it cheesy and silly? Absolutely. But my Lord, give me something to work with. Anyway, after the kid comes over, he then proceeds to offer the oldest sister, who's 15 years old, by the way, he offers her some drugs. He then makes an ass of himself by breaking some bottles of booze on the ground, and this gives us an opportunity, or gives the filmmaker an opportunity, to have him go upstairs and get some towels to clean it up, and now he's all alone. With this kind of opportunity, Chauncey snaps at it. I don't know, man. And he attacks the kid. Oh.
I know. I don't like him either. Maybe you should eat him.
Our little bear Chauncey is all grown up now. The way this thing looks in this scene is so silly that it made me laugh. The horror is this movie is not a horror film. After this bad little bear jump scare, Jessica ends up coming back home and is pissed off because there's a boy in the house, of course. We see a cut to the next scene where the kid's mom comes over and Jessica's like, hey, your kid came over and tried to offer my kid drugs.
I come home and find your son giving Molly to my 15-year-old.
I'm sorry, this isn't Molly. This is my allergy medicine. Get back to the house, you idiot.
What a dork. What a fucking dork. Moving on, throughout the middle section of this film, the little girl's been running around doing errands almost. She's on a scavenger hunt, telling everyone that Chauncey wants her to collect some items, and that this list is top secret. Now, how it plays into the movie, after she does the scavenger hunt, it opens a secret door in the house, and she'll be teleported to another dimension. We'll see that later. The stepmom ends up finding the scavenger list, and it's just in time too, because right after she finds it, she sees the little girl trying to slap a nail on a board, because the last thing on the list is something that causes pain or some stuff like that. It's the last step, though. After saving the little girl, things amp up, sort of. The stepmom wants to get to the bottom of what's going on, and she calls in a therapist to come and talk to the little girl. This is where the plot twist happens that I really hate in this movie. During this interaction with the therapist, we see the little girl set the bear down on the couch kind of behind her, and we hear it start talking while she's facing away from the camera and the therapist.
But I told you it made me scared. Chauncey need Alice be brave. Chauncey, keep Alice safe. I just want to go back to having fun, like we did before. No, go back. New things to see.
Which we know as an audience, oh wait, that's not her talking, it's the bear. She's actually having an emotional argument with this bear. But then the little girl kind of turns around and starts talking to the therapist, and we see it's not her talking, because she's just sitting there crying and we still hear the voice. The therapist then goes and shows Jessica the footage. Then the plot twist happens. I'll show it to you.
I gotta destroy that bear.
What bear?
Chauncey. Alice's stuffed bear. The stuffed bear Alice brought into the study.
I don't understand.
What is this? Yeah, and she put it down on the sofa there, right? What?
There was never any bear.
Only Jessica and the little girl can see this bear. The bear is entirely imaginary. Not only is there an imaginary friend connected to it, but the bear itself is imaginary. They show some scenes of the little girl playing with the bear. The bear just doesn't exist, but Jessica can see it. This causes Jessica to realize that this bear was the same imaginary friend that she had, and she goes back and looks at some childhood drawings that she had. They sit there and bicker a bit while Jessica looks through her stuff, and then they go to find the little girl. She's missing. She went into the door. We see that. She finished her little scavenger hunt. Then Jessica and the sister go around looking for her, going around outside. And it's here that the weird neighbor lady that showed up earlier comes up to the stepdaughter. Her whole character at this point is just to explain to us the entire lore and story here. So they all then work together to recreate the scavenger hunt and open up the door. Oh yeah, let's talk about the therapist really quick. I forgot about this. It's also insinuated that the therapist has had a bunch of cases like this. Like, she shows this one case where this little boy had cut his finger off and then disappeared 2 weeks later. So he also had the same imaginary friend that took him to Imagination Land, I guess. Wow. Let's also talk about if this bear is imaginary. How does that work? For instance, how did the kid, the neighbor that came over earlier, interact with the bear and get scared by it if it's just imaginary and nobody but Jessica and the little girl can see it? Did a bear no one had ever seen before just suddenly appear out of nowhere? Why doesn't it just make itself appear all the time? Does it only appear when it wants to scare people? Did the kid also have a stuffed animal imaginary friend when he was a kid so he can also see this and he survived it? With the scavenger hunt being done and them finally getting the door to appear, my hopes were a little bit higher for this last part of the movie, expecting this Imagination Land was going to be something interesting or look cool or have some fun scares or something in it, because the entire lead up to this has been very boring. But my hopes for this Imagination Land portion, I'm just going to call it that, cut out from underneath me because it's probably the worst part of the movie. How do you fuck Imagination Land up? Like, it could be literally anything you want it to be. And it's your imagination. It's the little girl's imagination, or the people that are inside. It could be anything. But instead, Imagination Land is just a bland, blue-looking hallway with a bunch of doors that don't go anywhere. I mean, there's some stairs that lead to nothing, and a hallway that just suddenly ends. Okay. Holy fuck. Stairs that don't go anywhere. There's also a really tacky echo sound because of the reverb that they used on this.
All these years, everyone said that my books were the nonsensical ramblings of a crazy old lady, but now I know for sure. It's incredible! A kingdom of our imagination that can be whatever we want it to be!
So happy for you. Really?
Is that what we're supposed to be waiting for? Are we supposed to be on the edge of our seats waiting for her to make another funny? It's after getting into this frightening world of imagination that the neighbor turns out to be the adversary, which I guess at least explains the purpose for her being here. She tells them, hey, I've been working with the entity to get you guys in here. What a twist, man. What a twist. Now that I think about it, this just feels like a bad kid's Disney horror movie, the entire thing. I knew I was picking up on that throughout the film, but I made sure to write it down in this part. I don't really know how to explain it either. That's just the word that comes to mind. If you remember the bad Disney horror films that they put out around Halloween, like back in the 2000s, then I think you'd understand. The acting is also very Disney-esque.
It's incredible!
And the way the death happens off screen and the gore happens off screen, it's a lot of the horror is done by pulling somebody off screen. It's very childlike. It's a movie about imagination, so I kind of understand that. But it's supposed to be a horror film. And I've said it once and I'll say it again, I'll say it forever. There are several very good PG-13 horror films. So just because this movie's PG-13 doesn't mean it was made for kids, and it also doesn't give it a pass for sucking ass. Anyway, after the neighbor lady turns on them and then gets dragged off by an entity, the stepdaughter and Jessica get separated, and a bunch of different imagination stuff is shown to them. It's a good explanation. Most of it just made me want to stick a fork into an electrical outlet. Like this extra scare of the bear doing the same thing to this girl as it did to the boy earlier. I guess this moment is amped up a bit better, but I can recall a moment in Annabelle of this exact scene with this light toy moving around and then matching up with something and it becoming the real entity. I saw that in my Conjuring video. That is a direct ripoff, and it was probably ripped off by other people. I think suffering is a great word to describe how I felt during this Imagination Land segment. After some half-ass attempts at scaring us, that the stepmom and the stepdaughter kind of reconnect. They end up finding the little girl through one of the doors where she's with her mom in this Imagination Land. I guess she's doing a tea party and dressed all fancy. They end up talking her into the fact that this isn't real, and they draw another portal on the wall, and they make it out. This is a false ending.
I'm still here.
You lied. Do you really think he'd let you go?
No. never leave. If you do, he'll come back for Taylor, for Alice. If you love them, this is how you save them.
Why? Literally, why? What were the eyes on those things supposed to be? There's these eyes on all the people as soon as we realize that she's still in imagination land in this hospital. Are they like bug eyes? Or are they meant to be like the plastic hard eyes on stuffed animals? I can't tell either way. What were they thinking, by the way? I was like, holy shit, this movie's finally over. And then I looked at the time and realized, no, there's more. There's definitely more. So the little girl and the teenager, I think, got out of this place, and it's just Jessica running about. We see doors open and slam shut over and over again, and then we see the actual door kind of pop open. This entity from the intro to the movie shows back up and chases her. She gets in through the portal, and then they work together as a unit to close it off. The little daughter actually becomes the hero of this movie this time, though, and she ends up catching the thing on fire. They then run out of the house, and the house just instantly starts burning down. Like, by the time they exit out of the house, which would take maybe 15 seconds, the entire house is up in flames. And as soon as they get to the road, a fire truck pulls up, like, already. This made me think that this was also a false ending because of how, like, what the hell? That doesn't make any sense. But no, this is the real ending. I mean, you could easily fix this with a bit of editing. Say the characters run out of the house and we see them looking at their house from the road. Like, this is, every movie does this. And they see it's burning. Then you see a cut and you see them standing next to a fire truck or a paramedic's vehicle, an ambulance, and they have blankets wrapped over them, you know, drinking hot cocoa. We can look at the sky and see that it's obviously darker outside, meaning time's passed when they came. Like, you could have done that, but instead they made me almost think there was another plot twist that was going to happen, and they didn't get out again. The movie then ends with some eventual sequel bait, of course. I really hope we don't get another movie. This movie did make a pretty decent amount of money, though. Somehow it was supposed to be shot and made on a $13 million budget. I highly doubt that, unless they hired a really expensive team to make that awful CGI in the imagination land. I don't see it, but it made like $30-40 million, so we're probably going to get another sequel. Knowing Blumhouse, they're going to put out more and more garbage. The fall from grace is a hard, slow fall. I actually had a decent sigh of relief after this movie ended. It was just like, holy thank God that's over. The movie did not need to be an hour and 40 minutes long. The acting all throughout the film falls flat on its nose, and it's just, my lord, my lord, my lord, very slow. There's a scene I didn't really talk about in the movie that's the only scary scene, I'd say, in the entire film. Isn't even scary. It is the peak of horror in this movie, though. The little girl kind of hops in bed with her dad and stepmom, and we hear walking down the hall, which is a little bit creepy, and it seems like only Jessica can hear it, and when she looks underneath the bed, she sees the bear, but she's like the only one that could see it, which is foreshadowing to the plot twist that we see. I didn't mention it earlier in the movie because I didn't want to explain the plot twist that early. I wish that they would have brought a child actor or spent some decent money on a high-quality childhood actor for this role. I think it would have made the movie quite a bit better if the kid in the movie was a lot better. There's so many more things you could convey, but the movie's just fucking butt. From the story to the dialogue to the acting to the jump scares and horror. I think I'd give this movie like a 2 out of 10, and that's kind of being nice. I don't even want to give it the 2. I think the only enjoyable part of this movie was me realizing, hey, I'm going to make a video on this, so that's making me kind of want to watch it. I feel like if I were to actually just watch this movie on my own without trying to make a video on it, I'd probably turn it off within the first 5 minutes. Anyway, the bear was cute, but that doesn't make up for how bad the movie is. If there's another film, like a sequel to this, I'd hope that it's made by a different director and an entirely different writing room. I don't know who wrote this movie. Maybe the director wrote this. I hope not. Anyway, that was Imaginary, the worst film of the year so far. I don't see it getting much worse than this movie. I at least hope not. I remember thinking when I did the video on Night Swim that was probably going to be the peak of horror for 2024 until this little thing came along. My expectations were a bit higher for this than it was for Night Swim, though. A haunted swimming pool is just a little imaginary haunted cute bear could at least be funny. Now that that's over, thank you guys for watching. If you made it this far, I really appreciate you. If you enjoyed the video, drop me a like and sub to the channel. If you have any ideas for what you want me to cover next, even if it's an obscure film or something that's not too popular, I might want to watch it. And until next time,